Josh, thanks for joining us. Can you start by introducing yourself and telling us a bit about your professional background?
Yeah, of course. Hi, I'm Josh Chandley, president and COO of WildCard Games, where we build hyper retentive casual games that primarily ad monetized. I've been in mobile 14 years now. At WildCard, I've led our rebuild from near collapse post COVID to record profitable scale. And now I architect the systems that keep us growing. My work primarily sits at the intersection of product growth and strategy, building games that scale systematically and capital efficiently.
Hardest working people in mobile.
Thank you.
Josh, how do you define the role of retention in the overall LTV equation for your mobile games?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when it comes right down to it, LTV is just ARPDAU times days played. So retention is one of those two primary yield multipliers. We're all competing for scale using these algorithms that optimize either a day 7 or like a day 28 ROAS. And so in a lot of ways, retention defines how much money you make after that window and after your break even. It defines the durability of your business. So if your D30 is 3%, that game is toast once UA slows down. Keeping your portfolio going is dependent on retention. And that's why I think of retention as the backbone of LTV, but also secretly the backbone of your profit margin. It's the multiplier that makes every other lever work harder.
And I mean, you're the boss, so I know that retention is near and dear to your heart, given what you just said about profits. But where do you think retention ownership should sit inside any other company, product growth, or somewhere else?
Nowhere and
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah,
It's sort of asking where ARPDAU should sit. On one hand, the product team spends half their time trying to move ARPDAU. On the other hand, UA has like an order of magnitude more impact on that direct statistic. Campaign type and geo can 10x ARPDAU in a day. The same is true for retention. If you silo it in growth, product suffers. If you silo it in product, growth suffers. And so, from my point of view, almost no matter the scale of a business, retention has to be co owned. Product shapes it, then growth amplifies it with targeting. You only get real lift when both are accountable for the same outcome. Does that make sense?
absolutely. I mean, do you think those conversations are happening naturally in other companies, or do you think there's still a good amount of friction and maybe healthy friction when they talk?
I think it depends on something a bit more high level, which is how connected are the product and UA teams in the first place. These conversations should be around retention. They should be around geos. They should be around ARPDAU maturation. When you think about it from the perspective that product is ultimately shaping all this stuff and then growth is amplifying it, they're both incredibly helpful teams to each other. And so if you approach it from that angle, it tends to work really well. But I do see, especially at high scale, the friction is not enough collaboration and closeness. And that's really the challenge. And it kind of permeates across the business.
So at Wildcard, you've helped titles succeed by focusing on product growth and systems, not necessarily org structure. What systems or frameworks have proven most valuable for you?
I think the soul of Wildcard is two things. It's our feedback loops and it's our game technology. Every new feature, every new creative, every new UA campaign goes through the same core framework, and it's how we communicate internally. There's a hypothesis, there's a test design, there's a data gathering phase, and then there's an analysis and decision phase. It sounds simple because it is. We've made a conscious decision to prioritize data over opinions and also to prioritize speed to data over speed to ship. And so that's what I mean by like the feedback loop culture. The other really high yield system is that once we learn something, we want to apply that learning as broadly as possible. And so all of our games are built on what we call the game factory code base. They all share a common architecture. So when we ship a new feature, whether it's a leaderboard, an offer, a goal system, a re-engagement system, if it tests positive in one game, then it moves to them all at a tiny fraction of the cost. And you can begin A/B testing there too. That's how we scale, not by chasing one-off hits, but by learning faster and then compounding those learnings across a portfolio. And I think that approach is pretty universal.
Amazing. So like building in a modular fashion that just allows you to implement all those across the board when they really work.
Yeah, because even
Mm,
in non-gaming, if you're operating a portfolio, being able to efficiently scale your winners across that portfolio is incredibly valuable.
yeah, absolutely. You've spoken, about designing systems that scale, obviously, in the context of creative operations and retargeting. What are the biggest mistakes you see growth teams make when trying to scale personalization across channels?
Yeah. With creative, the biggest mistake is treating the team too much like a production shop. Wildcard, the creative team owns their whole feedback loop so that they can just go and learn as fast as possible. They do the research, they do the concepting, the production, they even run their own creative tests and are trained to report and analyze that data. And so what the UA team gets is like a prioritized backlog of things to promote for every channel. It's amazing. At other studios, I see there's often a tendency to kind of wall off creative and prevent them from getting their hands quite that dirty. The downside there is that in many scenarios, the UA team is almost stuck playing telephone, trying to teach creative teams how to make more compelling ads. And the reason, the telephone game sucks is because it's so lossy. And this is one of those feedback loops where you want it to be very fast and very high fidelity. And so really focusing on that is most effective. With with retention, I think this is something that I've personally struggled with. And so the scar tissue there is real, but the mistake is timing. I've seen teams jump into retargeting too early before they have meaningful scale, and so the results look bad. And I've seen teams jump in too late when the audiences and the players, like, they've already had some meaningful churn where it's hard to pull them back in. The system truth there is the same with creatives as feedback loops. The faster you can test and apply retargeting, the more durable those personalization efforts are going to become. And try to find ad networks that can help you make that decision in real time about when it makes sense to make that move.
What role does creative play in retention strategies beyond just being a UA lever?
I mean, creative is your first impression. It sets the expectation that players carry down funnel into the game. Cheap tricks like a fake update now ad or a promise of no ads when there's totally ads in your game, they slash CPI. They also slash LTV, but often it can still back out to a good ROAS, but they never engage deeply. The promise and the product don't match. And so when you're thinking about retention, the most sustainable creative is when the UA makes a promise, the onboarding delivers it, and then the elder play is almost a caricature of it. And if you can create that alignment, retention starts to just magically go up. And so the role creative play is essentially that beachhead. It's establishing those expectations.
Only about 5% of marketers achieve greater than 60% opt-in rates for ATT, despite generally broad adoption of the pre-permission prompts. Have you found any creative or UX tactics that move the needle here, or is it just kind of a plateau the industry has to accept?
Yeah, and it's incredibly valuable to get that opt-in. Wildcard's primarily ad optimized. When we get that opt-in, in-game CPMs, how much revenue we receive per ad, jumps over 80%. And if you don't run Admon, that's a signal. The ad networks need you to help them by providing that opt-in so that they can help you grow. Uh, we've tested it. You can claw back some pretty material percentage points with copy and flow, but the plateau is real and it is somewhat genre and geo dependent. After a while, the gains get very challenging. And so my kind of recommendations are simple. It's publishers, chase it as much as you can. Networks, please proactively work with your publishers to make sure that they know what you see as winning UX flows and what you see as winning techniques. Because if we can all work together, I think we can compound those results.
A third of marketers now run monthly incrementality tests, while another third still don't run them at all. What's your take on the value of incrementality testing for retention campaigns? And how do you balance rigor with speed when testing across multiple channels?
Yeah, I mean, incrementality is a broad term. Executed poorly, I've seen it be about a backwards looking truth that even if you just think about seasonality becomes somewhat irrelevant and it because is a slow and academic thing. Alternatively, it can be too fast and noisy and low fidelity. However, I don't see a lot of scaled teams making that mistake as often. I think the balance is rigor at speed, designing tests that are fast enough to drive iteration, but disciplined enough to keep you honest. The most valuable thing you can have is a portfolio so that you can A B test rather than before and after test. If you're able to have some games that are similar run one strategy and some run another strategy, that is a much better incrementality test than in Q3 do one thing and in Q4 do the other thing because it's just not going to be as easy to compare. And so at Wildcard, we think about that rhythm and how to keep ourselves scaling without misleading ourselves and removing any compounding factors or confounding factors.
Josh, really appreciate the time. Where can we find you? And is there anything cool that you're working on that you want to tell us about?
Well, thank you for having me. And you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. I write about ad tech, growth loops, and what it really takes to build companies that survive storms. Wildcard, we're scaling fast and we're building a portfolio engine. And that's a story I'll be sharing more about later this year.
Amazing. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much, Cameron.